with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Marco Fonseca returns to the show to discuss the massive loss for the conservative right-wing establishment in Guatemala's elections. Also on the show, Trump says he'll surrender to Georgia authorities on Thursday, his 4th arrest since April. Meanwhile, Trump's lawyers are claiming they need until 2026 to review evidence in the federal January 6th case, trying to put off the trial until then, which is a hilarious Hail Mary. Biden finally visits Maui after the horrific wildfires, promises federal support. Mudslides and flooding in Southern California after Tropical Storm Hillary made landfall. Ronan Farrow profiled Elon Musk, revealing an alleged ketamine problem and gouging over of the DoD over Starlink internet access in Ukraine. Maybe we shouldn't privatize that stuff.
Yeah,
if we satellites,
profiteers involved in this.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Biden begins a PR push for his much smaller scale student debt relief programs, the SAVE plan, to help reduce monthly payments, which resumes soon. Child care facilities face a funding cliff as federal COVID relief money is set to expire on September 30th. The Supreme Court to hear a new case on race admissions, this time in high schools. Indiana's abortion ban to take effect after the state Supreme Court blocks an ACLU challenge. And Alabama's felony gender-affirming care ban for minors upheld by a circuit court. Anti-Cop City organizers have collected the necessary 100,000 signatures, but Atlanta officials are not going to make it easy for them. And lastly, a federal judge to take up the case that would determine the legality of Greg Abbott's border death traps, but he is a Reagan appointee, unfortunately. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is a news day Tuesday. Yes, it is. We have a guest, but it's still a news day. We'll be talking to Marco about what happened, the actually very good news coming out of Guatemala. The rest of the show might be a little bit angering for you. Hello to Bradley. Hello to Matt. Again.
Good afternoon.
Oh, yes, it is afternoon, technically, for sure. Right now, at least here. Just another, programming note. I always like to get these out of the way. Sam out for the rest of the week, but tomorrow we're doing debate coverage for the first Republican debate.
Woo-hoo.
A little stream.
Might be doing some freestyles.
Yeah, a little drinky, little pizza.
Bradley, do not do that one because people. I'm sorry. It's funny that you did that, but people are driving when they read the or listen to the podcast.
Oh my gosh!
It's honestly not
Should
one
we
to play.
take it off?
Sorry about that one.
No, just don't play it again.
Sorry, guys.
It's like playing
That
sirens
was a
or
fake
something.
car crash.
Yeah, if you're driving, honestly, sorry.
Disclaimer. Let's get into it though. This story I headlined yesterday, but I wanted to do a bit of a deeper dive. A woman named Lori, Laura Ann Carlton, but went by Lori, was killed on Friday outside of her clothing boutique in California around 60 miles east of Los Angeles. She was killed by a man who was 27 years old. Lori was 66. She was a mother. He killed her, most likely due to the fact that she had a pride flag hanging outside of her boutique store. The man shot her, ran after shooting her, had a shootout with the cops, and was killed himself. He shot Lori with a semi-automatic gun, a handgun. It was not registered to him. He didn't have a license, according to the sheriff's office, and reportedly, the killer shouted homophobic slurs during the attack. And this pairs, not nicely, but it makes a ton of sense when you also see his extensive social media profile, which was filled with anti-gay hatred. Let's pull up what Ari Drennan of Media Matters found. I mean, the sheriff's office said in their statement that, this guy's social media profile was filled with this kind of stuff, including images of a burning pride flag. I'm not going to say the shooter's name. You'll see it here probably, but this is that. Let's pull this up. These are some of the right-wing media personalities that the shooter was posting. The Matt Walsh show going after, the Dylan Mulvaney stuff with Bud Light, and Target
is calling our bluff. Oh, well, what should you do then?
Yep. Next up, some of the other hosts, Jordan Peterson here, naturally. Let's zoom out on that. I think we could probably see a little bit more, right? Am I wrong? A post by Jordan Peterson there. A woke mob of narcissists and psychopaths he's speaking about. Another, I'm not sure what that article's about.
Incitation. What type of people does Jordan Peterson and Matt Walsh think he has in their audience? How do they think they're going to react to this type of hysterical agitation?
And that headline is that says for the Telegraph, pupil who questioned classmate identifying as a cat. So this classic
nonsense conspiracy theorist peddled by right wingers, including corporate media shill Joe Rogan. Let's keep going. Benny Johnson calling pride and these kinds of displays child abuse, groomers. And then keep going. Repost or speaking about killing the octopus, not cutting off the legs, talking in reference to the LGBTQIA community below. You get the idea. And Keith Boykin also found other posts here from this killer. It's incredibly extensive. I mean, the guy was a Trump supporter until Trump was too moderate for him, apparently. Or at least he was critical of Trump at some point because of it. He's a Christian, right-winger.
Psycho,
just homophobic conspiracy theories all over the place. And I also wanted to display this statement by the daughter of the shop owner, Lori Carlton, who posted an Instagram tribute here. And she writes, "As most of you know, our beautiful mommy was taken from us in a senseless act of violence on Friday, August 18th. She was murdered over a pride flag that she proudly hung on her storefront. Make no mistake, this was a hate crime. Her flags had been torn down before, and she always responded by putting up a bigger one. Our family is broken. We have a long road ahead of us. As we navigate this new reality with our loving matriarch, we find peace in knowing she passed quickly in the place she cherished, doing what she loved while fiercely defending something she believed in." So that's part of the statement there. We don't, it's just devastating. She was apparently a mother of 9. And I just wanted to highlight this at the start of the show because whether it's the Pulse nightclub shooting, whether it's bricks being thrown in storefronts that have pride flags, whether it's attempts to severely damage or burn down pride centers in other parts of the country, this is stochastic terrorism enabled by a a rabid right-wing media apparatus that is 100% engaged in this kind of hatred for money, and the true believers are okay with this kind of violence being inflicted upon people who choose to show solidarity with the LGBTQ community. But it's kind of indistinguishable from the people that do it for money. It doesn't really matter what their intentions are. What matters is that they're fine with this kind of violence in the end, because either they're making a killing or they believe that this is what people deserve. And members of the media, we saw this with Tiller the baby killer back in Bill O'Reilly's days, where he called out this doctor who was providing abortions by name. Eventually someone killed him.
Yeah.
And that's just the price of doing business for the right.
Yeah. But maybe we get some blogs saying, hey, why don't you just review Bill O'Reilly's segment about if Tiller's a baby killer? Why is the media afraid to engage with it, as Matt Taibbi said? This is where this actually leads to. And people like acting as if there's some sort of intramural debate to be had with these hate mongers are a whole nother problem to deal with.
Exactly. And there's not even much commentary here. It's just, look at this, right? This is our country.
Here's a tweet from the guy. Just the first couple lines. America must repent for a lot of things we allow: abortion/baby killing, sexual immortality. I think he means immorality. Sexual immortality is pornography.
Darkly so.
We just got to stop these sexual immortals. Pornography, same-sex marriages, LGBT, blah blah blah.
Yep. I mean, and then they'll say it's mental health, right? I mean, this guy was clearly crazy. Yeah. There's always going to be somebody that is not
this
all the way right.
By Benny Johnson, where's the line type of hystericism? This is your civilization going down the drain. We have an extremely armed country. What do you think's going to happen?
When you say that those are the stakes, and then you play into people who might find some sort of radicalization in religious extremism, where they see basically gay people, trans people as demons, they're going to act on that if they really believe that they're
literally believe demons exist.
They believe, I mean, this for all the talk about how this country is founded on Christian values, sometimes people go really hard into their idea of what Christian values are, including the belief in, the bad fairies coming through gay people, and they're gonna take matters into their own hands.
With the trans stuff, it's like, oh, you want to know what is woman? Okay, I'll answer that once you answer. Do you think demons literally exist?
Yeah, right. Tragic story, but yet just another example of what this leads to. All right, guys, we have a quick word from one of our sponsors, and when we come back, we are going to be diving into the results of the Guatemala elections with Marco Fonseca.
So, folks, about 2 years ago now, I have no idea of time. People were like, please sell merch, please sell merch, please sell merch, please sell merch. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. It's going to be a pain in the butt. We're not going to be able to put up new products quick enough. And then, I don't know if it was my sister, somebody was like, Shopify, just get Shopify. And it turns out Shopify is the commerce platform that is revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Doesn't matter whether you're a garage entrepreneur or a podcast host trying to sell merch, because everybody keeps telling you, sell merch, sell merch, sell merch. Shopify is the only tool you need to start, to run, to grow your business without the hassle, the struggle, the intimidation, whatever it is. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So it doesn't matter whether you're selling, your merch from our Shopify's in-person POS system. That's point of sale. I learned that through Shopify. So if we have like a live show, or it doesn't matter if you're, offering organic olive oil on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you're covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help you turn them from browsers to buyers. In other words, you click on that merch and it's like bingo, bango, I'm buying it. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Shopify is truly a global force. They power Allbirds, Rothy's, and millions of other entrepreneurs, every size across 170 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Super easy. Super easy to set up Shopify. Easy for us to pop on like a, somebody was actually saying like we should get a whoopsie for the Emma Majority Report. And really, the only thing that's holding us back is actually like creating it, but putting it up on there, it's done in a minute. Plus, you can set up your Shopify store on all the social media channels. Doesn't matter, all of them. And it's the easiness. That's what I like. I like turnkey experiences. But for other people, it could be how you can scale this thing. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/majority. All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/majority. Take your business to the next level today. Shopify.com/majority. We, as usual, put the link in the podcast and YouTube subscription. Now back to Emma.
We are back, and we are joined once again by Marco Fonseca, instructor in Latin American and International Studies at the York University Glendon campus. Marco, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And you're back to talk about some good news, which is always welcome here when we're covering politics from the left. Last time we spoke with a lot of optimism after the center-left candidate Bernardo Arevalo, whose party is the Semilla Party, came in second place, surprisingly so, in the first round against Torres, and who was the right-wing candidate, and that was in June. Now, as of this weekend, Arevalo has won the presidential election in decisive fashion, I should say. Talk about this incredible moment.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a moment that Guatemala has not experienced in 80 years, 90 years since the last time Guatemala had news like this, when people woke up the next morning, was the election of Juan Jose Arevalo. That is to say, Bernardo Arevalo's father, way back in 1944. So this has been a long time coming. And you can see you can see the way people reacted to this on the streets of Guatemala. Spontaneous, upsurge of emotionality, of hope, of happiness, of drumming and pots banging and bubucelas, horns, ringing all through the country, not just in Guatemala City, all through the country. It was an exceptional turnout, a landslide victory for Bernardo Arevalo, the candidate nobody saw coming. The candidate came out of left field and won the elections and defeated the candidate of the party called UNE, UNE, who had been running for the third time and lost 37% to 58%, 1.2 million votes against nearly 1.7 million votes for Bernardo Arevalo. Something remarkable has happened in the country, and people know it. People feel it. It's like I said, a long time coming. So no wonder people refer to this as the dawn of a new spring.
You said, for the first time in 80 years, this is this kind of seismic shift since the election of the first democratically elected president of Guatemala, the father of the current incoming president Arevalo. And we mentioned this the last time we spoke, but Arevalo Sr.'s successor, Arbenz, was the one who was ousted in the infamous CIA-backed coup in the 50s. And how vivid is that history, the last name Arevalo, as well, for Guatemalans when they are going to the polls?
When Guatemalans think back to the 1944-1954 October Revolution, as it's also known in the country, they tend to think of both Arevalo and Arbenz almost in the same breath, almost in the same thought. They don't really think only Arevalo or only Arbenz. The two of them are like inextricably linked by historical experience. So the coup in 1954, therefore, doesn't feel to Guatemalans like a coup just against Arbenz. It also feels like a coup against Arevalo and Arevalo's legacy. So the coup left a kind of a traumatic experience in the memory of Guatemalans. Guatemalans have been carrying this for a very, very long time. And what's interesting about the elections in 2023 is the extent to which a lot of people didn't take this into account. A lot of people just did not think about the importance of this legacy in the memory of many Guatemalans, not only urban Guatemalans, also rural Guatemalans. And you could see this in Bernardo Arevalo's political campaign. He went to many towns in the country. And as he himself has said, many of these places he visited, he encountered people who went out on the streets to greet him, or he went into their homes. And what they showed him were pictures of his father or pictures of Jacobo Arbenz, remembering, the experience of the 44-54 revolution, essentially saying to him, and the signs said it themselves, we've been waiting for this for 70 years. So this is a factor that was not taken into account, the importance of that experience.
Who did not take it into account? I'm sorry to cut you off, Marco, but who do you think, was kind of so arrogant to assume that this would not be still in the mind
the right-wing political parties that have been in power, not only since 2016, 2015, but in fact since 1954. So right-wing political parties thought this legacy had been stamped out. Not really. Organizations that have been campaigning ceaselessly on an anti-communist kind of discourse in Guatemala, like the Foundation Against Terrorism, an extreme right-wing outlet dedicated to the persecution and harassment of judges and lawyers and so on who are engaged in what we know as transitional justice, bringing people accused of human rights violations to justice. These people like the Foundation Against Terrorism, right-wing political parties, but also the ruling economic elites of CACIF, they thought that this sort of experiences 80, 70 years ago were really no longer relevant for Guatemalans. They were sorely mistaken. And not only were they relevant now, they were relevant in 2015 as well, with the big, huge citizen uprisings that took place in the country that are, in fact, the foundation of this election.
Can you expand a little bit more on the persecution of lawyers, judges, people who are being targeted with imprisonment in recent years, and how that contributed to the climate as well?
Yes. Since the ousting of the United Nations Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, known as CICIG, C-I-C-I-G, in 2018, something that was done by President Jimmy Morales. Since the ousting of the CICIG Commission in Guatemala, the commission that had been working in the country for about 10 years, and it was charged with the investigation into clandestine bodies, present throughout different levels of the Guatemalan government and state in various forms, intelligence bodies, political bodies, political campaign finance bodies, you name it. The CICIG Commission was investigating this sort of things. They published earth-shaking reports in 2015, essentially revealing the links between political campaign and Guatemalan economic elites, the economic elites of CACIF. That's the most important corporate group in Guatemala. And together with CICIG, you then had also a number of very important people in Guatemala, like the chief of the public ministry at the time, Telma Aldana, for example. And you also have the special prosecutor against corruption in Guatemala, the then chief of the FECI, the FECI, the Fiscalía Especial contra la Impunidad, the special prosecutor against impunity. The chief of that is Juan Francisco Alfaro. You had people like Aldana, Alfaro, and then you have other prosecutors working with FECI. Prosecutors in the city of Quetzaltenango, for example, like Virginia La Parra, who is right now languishing in jail. And together with them, you also had a number of incredibly courageous, judges in Guatemala who were presiding over some of the trials brought before them by the special prosecutors of FECI under Juan Francisco Alfaro. Judges, very important, like Judge Galvez, for example, judges that are now, in exile. About 20 lawyers and judges and special prosecutors, including Telma Aldana, Juan Francisco Alfaro, Judge Galvez, and so on. They're all now in exile in Washington and other places. And the reason for that is because since the arrival into the public ministry of the current chief of the public ministry, Consuelo Porras, which was appointed by Jimmy Morales and then confirmed again for a second term in 2018 by President Giammattei, Consuelo Porras has essentially been wielding the power of the public ministry against those people dedicated to the prosecution of corruption. And among those people among the people that are being prosecuted are people like Alejandro Sinibaldi, people that are highly, highly corrupt, identified with the public finance of both the FSN Nación Party of Jimmy Morales and the Vamos Party of President Giammattei, the outgoing president right now. So the prosecution of all these people has resulted in the essentially the exile of lawyers and judges and prosecutors and so on.
That was going to be my next question about Giammattei, the current president, or now outgoing. I mean, what was his role? My understanding is that his approval ratings have been horrible because of crime, cost of living increases, and difficulties that people are feeling in their material lives. How did his tenure as president fit into, obviously, the targeting of his political opponents and just the economic and general situation, the climate that led to Arevalo winning in decisive fashion?
I think Giammattei started off in a kind of a dismal way. If we go back to the beginning of his tenure in 2020, we're talking about pandemic times. This is the middle of the pandemic in Guatemala. And one of the most infamous things Giammattei did, which pretty much set the tone of his presidency for the remainder of his period. Essentially, he told Guatemalans, listen, people, the pandemic, it's a serious problem. It's true. But the fact of the matter is, he said, is that it's pretty much everyone for himself. So you want to not get sick? That's up to you. I mean, and so for the longest of times, he refused to effectively implement a nationwide policy of fighting the pandemic with all of the instruments, that were available to a rather impoverished state to do it. So the toll of the pandemic in the country was dismal. The consequences were incredible. The collapse of the healthcare system was obvious for everyone to see. It could not cope with the number of people who ended up getting sick and ended up dying. And we're talking about the healthcare system, the very system which was set up in the country by Juan José Arevalo in the 1940s. So it's very important how all of this plays into 2023. So Alejandro Giammattei begins terribly with his mishandling of the pandemic. And then from then on, he goes on to implement a number of policies. His signature policy, perhaps, was his fighting against hunger, extreme hunger in the country. He poured millions of dollars into the fighting of hunger, which in Guatemala, under Giammattei and Morales and previous governments, effectively means handing out bags of food. Handing out bags of food to poor people. I mean, what can you do with a fish or two? I mean, you eat it and then that's it. The poverty doesn't go away. So his signature program was the fight against extreme hunger and malnutrition. This, it turns out, and we had a report in a local newspaper in Guatemala called Plaza Pública, which effectively revealed that not only did Giammattei failed in his signature policy, which is to eliminate extreme hunger in the country by about 7 percentage points, using the baseline when he came to office as the baseline. He failed entirely. Malnutrition levels in the country are, as we speak, on the rise. Right? On the rise. So just during his tenure, apparently, the number of people under extreme conditions of hunger has risen by 16,000 and growing. So his signature developmental policy was a complete failure. In addition to this, in addition to mishandling the pandemic, mishandling the extreme problems of inequality, poverty, hunger, malnutrition, child mortality, and crime in the country, Giammattei, of course, has also embarked in a process of sucking public finance, which is pretty much the same as what the government of Otto Pérez Molina did prior to 2015. In other words, the kind of corruption that the government engaged in that led to the citizen uprising of 2015 is the exact same kind of corruption, if not worse, that Giammattei effectively restored under his watch. So that it has been said, it has been argued, just to give you 4 examples, it has been argued that his most important political protege, a young man his name is Miguel Martinez, who was the chief of a special presidential office known as the government office within the government. This guy is claimed to have amassed a fortune reaching the incredible proportion of 2,000 million euros. I mean, it's unfathomable. But this
was just giveaways. This was just the giveaways to friends, to capitalists, to donors, and that's same old.
They have their ways. They have their ways. And one of the ways in which they do it is either they finance construction projects which are effectively overpriced, underbuilt, horrifically delivered, and then, of course, a lot of money siphoned out through what is effectively the piggy bank of corruption in Guatemala, the Ministry of Infrastructure, Communications, and Development. So they do this. And a lot of these contractors are friends of politicians, friends of the president, friends of Miguel Martinez. So they have their ways of allocating, I'm talking about thousands of millions of dollars in construction projects which are bogus, overpriced, underdelivered, terrible construction projects. This is truly one of the sources of enrichment for politicians in Guatemala. But then there's the other more open and more blatant approach to corruption, which is known in Guatemala, in the case of Giammattei, is known as the magic carpet approach, which is, for example, a bunch of Russian and Ukrainian investors in Guatemala. They wanted to get a special lease hold on one of the main ports of the country in the Pacific coast. This happened about 2 years ago. One of the very last cases revealed by Juan Francisco Alfaro, the special prosecutor who was fired by Consuelo Porras, who is now exiled in Washington. What he revealed is that a group of investors from Russia and Ukraine in Guatemala wanted to get a special leasehold on a chunk of land in one of the most important ports of the country. But to do that, they wanted to skip all the hurdles. They wanted to skip all the red tape. So they approached the president directly. And how did they do this? They effectively rolled up a red carpet, no kidding, stuffed with money, and went to Yamatei's presidential home, La Casa Presidencial, and reportedly handed over this carpet rolled up with, who knows how many millions of dollars inside to the president. When this
that
was
sounds
revealed,
like a movie. Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's a Gabriel Garcia Marquez kind of situation here. It's surreal how this kind of corruption can take place. But it did. And it is because this special prosecutor denounced this case publicly, and then the New York Times published a piece on it, that this guy ended up, not only getting fired from his job as the chief of FESI, but on top of that, he himself was going to be subjected to essentially legal war by Consuelo Porras.
So with all that context, which is helpful to understand how to break this, what it means to break this right-wing corrupt establishment in Guatemala, the stranglehold that it's had there for decades. Arevalo, he's been described as an anti-corruption candidate and as a reformer. What does that look like in practice? What are some of the hallmarks of what he is promising?
He says and has said repeatedly that there is no more important priority right now than to recover the institutions of the Guatemalan state that have been in the hands of corrupt politicians for a very long time. He has been repeating and emphasizing that there is no way to properly implement his political agenda, his development agenda, his environmental agenda, his health agenda, his education agenda, his four main key agendas. There's no way to implement them effectively, properly, until the very institutions charged with delivering that agenda are themselves not cleaned up from corruption. So that's going to be a significant challenge that Arevalo is going to have to deal with. That's number one. That's only within the power of the executive. But let's not forget that in Guatemala, the executive is only 1/3 of the state. The other two powers of the state, the legislative power and the judicial power, remain very, very much in the hands of corrupt political forces. And they are hell-bent on making it impossible for Arevalo not only to deliver his agenda, but to govern at all. They are going to make it very difficult for him to actually have access to the kind of money, for example, that he needs to be able to implement his agenda. They control the budget, and they're going to control it for the next 4 years. So it's not just a legacy Congress of corrupt politicians. It's a renovated Congress of corrupt politicians who are going to make it impossible for Arevalo to be able to get, the funds that he needs to be able to implement his agenda. So Arevalo says, I want to get rid of corruption. Number one priority. If we don't clean up the institutions, we cannot do very much else. And he's entirely right. But it's a bit of a catch-22. If you spend all your time cleaning up the institutions before you begin to deliver on your promises and your agenda, you're never going to get to deliver on anything, because if he only has effectively 3 years to govern. The 4th year is a kind of a sitting duck because it's campaign time. So it's going to be very difficult. On the other hand, right, if he doesn't tackle corruption, he is also not going to be able to deliver on his promises and on his agenda. He's really caught up between a rock and a hard place. It's going to be difficult for Arevalo to navigate between these two monsters, frankly. But he's determined. He's determined. And my own personal take on this is that for Arevalo to be able to deliver on his promises, deliver on the program of government he was elected on, deliver on his high-flying anti-corruption rhetoric, which I buy and I love, and I'm entirely for it. It's going to be to mobilize the streets. It's going to be to mobilize the people. It's going to be to mobilize La Plaza, the square. That's it. If he doesn't have the backing of citizens, if the people get disillusioned too quickly, if the honeymoon doesn't last too long, it's gonna spell trouble. So he needs to pursue a strategy a little bit similar to what Petro is doing in Colombia, which is to say, faced with these massive obstacles in the legislature, they are appealing to the street. They're appealing to citizens. They're appealing to social movements. They're appealing to civil society organizations to come and essentially articulate around government policies and the fight against corruption. That, to me, is going to be the path forward for Arevalo.
Well, Marco Fonseca, I can't thank you enough for coming on and giving us all of this context. Great news, but also the fight does not stop here. As you say, it needs to be continuous. Instructor in Latin American and International Studies at the York University Glendon campus. Marco, anything you want to plug as well, where people can find more of your work if they want to learn more about these topics?
Like I said before, I like to tweet a lot, so they can find me on Twitter.
Yes, exactly. Sounds good. All right. Appreciate your time, Marco. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, good news, but not without its challenges as well. I really appreciate Marco coming back on. We're going to go ahead.
It's similar to like when Bernie was saying like, hey, if I actually did win this thing, like that's what actually.
I thought that same thing. That's what it would have been like, right?
Yeah, really.
Could you imagine if Bernie actually won the nomination? The institutional heft,
the freak out about inflation, like the type of things that like you thought it was bad about Biden.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Think about the Afghanistan withdrawal. Like we would have had a absolute red scare.
Yes.
From the highest, perches of power in this country.
And the fact too that in Guatemala it really has been 70-80 years since there has been a break in this continual stream of corruption, right-wing rule as well. That adds even more barriers and difficulties for the path forward, but still a break had to happen, and it did. I wanted to touch on the story from yesterday about Ron DeSantis, because man, does this guy try to fashion himself as a new kind of conservative, Trump without the baggage. Oh man, I'm anti-woke and I'm going to drain the swamp. There's a quote in this piece about how Trump didn't actually drain the swamp, but I'm going to. That's a little hard to believe when you read this piece, because what is the swamp? How would you define the swamp? Just off the top of your head, what is the definition of the swamp? A corrupt political establishment? That's what most people think of, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think of like military contractors and stuff like that too, but
the standard person is going to think about corruption and everyone's in it for themselves. That is clearly a hallmark, not the anti-corruption, but the corruption of DeSantis's political rise. This was in the Post yesterday. The headline is, "I could sell golf," in quotes, how DeSantis and aides courted lobbyists for campaign cash. When Florida Governor Ron DeSantis took office in 2019, his political team made a list of the state's top 40 lobbyists and about 100 of their, quote, suggested clients to target for political contributions, according to a fundraising document reviewed by the Washington Post. Next to the name of each lobbyist was a dollar figure, an ask that the DeSantis team hoped they would raise based on their book of clients, whose names were also listed in the document and included large corporations such as Disney and Motorola, as well as sports organization billionaires and interest groups with extensive business before the state. The Florida governor's fundraisers hoped that 9 lobbyists would raise at least $1 million each for DeSantis' political action committee, the state and the Republican Governors Association, according to the document, which was drafted by Heather Barker, a top DeSantis aide and his primary fundraiser, and shared with others. To help them haul in large sums of money, the document suggested that lobbyists be allowed to offer their clients certain perks, such as meals and rounds of golf with DeSantis, who loves the sport. DeSantis fundraisers envisioned that some golf outings with the governor would net contributions of $75,000 or more, according to other emails among DeSantis' political advisors. I could sell golf for $50K this morning, Barker wrote to other DeSantis aides in a 2019 email obtained by the Post, noting that a prominent Tallahassee lobbyist and his wife wanted to play golf with the recently elected DeSantis and First Lady Casey DeSantis at a course the governor favored. The lobbyist would, quote, get money through a client to contribute in exchange for golfing with DeSantis, she wrote. It is unclear if the meeting happened. Barker did not respond to a request for comment. So, like, it's not to golf with DeSantis. Let's be real. It's to get, how long is it
I'm trying to work on my
18 holes? Like what? 6 hours to do 18 holes? 5 hours?
I've never done 18,
4 or
but
5.
yeah, it's the longest time.
Yeah. So that's the value of it. It's the FaceTime, and then the lobbyist is the bag man that shows up and sell or that acts as the intermediary between the special business interests and DeSantis. And then there's a round of golf where they're able to talk through the giveaways that they're going to give in exchange. The 2019 document detailed other avenues for securing contributions. Methods for firms to deliver support. Golf, lunch, meetings, dinner, tours, events, etc. Each have a threshold. Example, golf, $25K per person, which is a deal, reads the document, whose authenticity was confirmed by multiple people with knowledge of it. While it is common for politicians to seek donations from lobbyists, the efforts by DeSantis to effectively auction off his leisure time to those seeking to influence state policy created a special pathway of access for wealthy donors to the governor that is striking in the way that it was documented in writing, ethics experts said. The golf-related fundraising was a part of a broader push by DeSantis to cultivate relationships with big contributors, some of whom have received state appointments or benefited from state policies, as the Post has previously reported. The Post report they're referring to in particular there is one that shows that there was $92 million in leftover federal COVID relief funds that went to a donor, this one donor, this real estate guy named Husseini, and he ended up using that to construct some sort of shopping center / somewhat housing development down there.
Right.
And that previous article talks about how he was a part of the scheme of getting FaceTime with DeSantis through that. Now, as a candidate for president, DeSantis' close ties with donors could undermine his attempt to portray himself as someone who would do a better job taking on special interest than former President Donald Trump, the polling leader in the GOP race. We've drained the swamp in here, he said in a recent Fox News interview about his time as governor in Florida. One of the things he did not do was drain the swamp. People familiar with the governor's fundraising described the operation as one that included direct involvement by the governor. DeSantis made some calls to lobbyists, the documents show, and often took meetings that were orchestrated by the team, which was run by political aides to the governor. The Post continues to talk about how involved DeSantis was in this. DeSantis' team sought to take advantage of his special fondness for golf for political fundraising, according to documents and interviews. A state party credit card was on file to cover fees and meals in at least one club where they played, and lobbyists were told he preferred certain courses. One lobbyist involved in the fundraising effort said clients wanted to golf with DeSantis because it guaranteed them hours of FaceTime with the governor.
It wasn't because they're working on their chipping out of sand traps?
It was not. It's about getting your phone calls returned and having the ability to make asks, the lobbyist said. I mean, it's incredible how open they are with this. You want to engender access and goodwill with the governor. More broadly, the documents and interviews provide an extraordinary glimpse of how DeSantis and his team interacted with big donors as they appeared to sell his personal time to political contributors. They included some of Florida's biggest corporations, including some companies that went on to win favorable policy changes from the DeSantis administration. WellCare, a prominent healthcare company, agreed to give $50,000 in the early days of the governor's administration, an email from Barker shows. But the CEO wanted to see the governor. A lunch was planned. The CEO of Welfare must hand-deliver the check prior to session. An email from Barker, the fundraiser, reads. The company did not respond to requests for comment. The CEO has to hand-deliver a check to DeSantis in order for him to get access. I mean, look, the problem is generally just capitalism, right? Corruption is a a byproduct of having a neoliberal style free market fundamentalist worldview. Because when you let money run rampant like that, that money is always going to be used to influence political systems. That's just inherent in it. However, the Republican Party is more corrupt than the Democratic Party. And even the crusaders that describe themselves as alternatives or people that are taking on corporations in ways that are purely aesthetic about wokeness and about black people being in cartoons, for example, like DeSantis, behind the scenes, he's taking calls from all of the bagmen that work for them. And that is an important distinction that people need to understand. It's an insane way to run a political system in this day and age. But this is more common than you would think. But it's important to recognize this too, because Ron DeSantis, I hesitate to say that his candidacy is one that's artificially inflated, because I know that there was some enthusiasm for him a few months ago.
Well,
but the thing about it is we're seeing it bear out in poll numbers. Moneyed interests wanted Trump without the baggage. They wanted a guy that they knew they could work with behind the scenes, that they could corrupt, who wasn't such a wild card, who didn't piss off the liberals, who maybe could win over some suburban moms, and meanwhile meet with Club for Growth donors and be the same old person that they've been backing for years and years in Republican primaries, whether it's Scott Walker, whether it's Jeb Bush, whether it's...
that's the thing, is Jeb Bush had the big, what do they call it, the war chest last time. It's the exact same sort of big balloon, and it's a good sign, and it's partially why Democrats have won elections, that they don't have a bench either that isn't entirely repugnant to American voter, right? Like Joe Biden makes the Republican bench look like absolute, what they are, freaks.
Yeah.
Like, he looks like a normal guy compared to them. And like whoever, it's crazy. Like we see DeSantis completely flaming out, and there's no one really to take his place besides Vivek. But to your point about money in politics, like, this is how this stuff is done. I'd be surprised if most sort of staffs don't have somebody like on the first couple of days being like, hey, let's get a list of all the sort of money piñatas that we can invite for golf.
Yeah.
And I think like the worst part of it is that we have politicians trying to act like they aren't that, as they are participating in it, like in the most sort of craven way.
Well, and surface level way of, Republicans, this is something for your political education that I think is very valuable. If they ever talk about a corporation, just know this, it's never about the bottom line. Except if they're targeting a specific corporation for their own like HR policies or public relations or advertising. It's aesthetic. It's just about, well, we should get one of our guys in there and they do it better. As opposed to what would really be taking on corporate power would be taxing the hell out of them. Or breaking them up through antitrust. And
another interesting thing about DeSantis in this context, in that, as you're alluding to, of course, with this story, with like the this one in particular, and also the prelude with the Mori Hosseini guy, getting what he wanted in that interchange, whatever the case was in that regard, is that he's so bought when it comes to like state affairs, but he's also running his campaign in the way where you're like, there's no other way to conclude that this guy is like the most bought and paid for candidate, because a lot of his campaign operations are being basically run through Never Back Down, his PAC, which is basically serving as like his shadow campaign, because they are running a lot of campaign operations in early primary states. But the catch there obviously is, because it's a PAC, the DeSantis campaign can't interact with them, but they are literally operating the majority of his campaign. So he is going to Never Back Down events where obviously his enormous benefactors are paying through the PAC, and he's serving as like a special guest to Never Back Down PAC events.
That's supposedly illegal.
And so,
but it's not enforceable because our laws are such a joke on it.
And so I think certain even election regulators, if they were actually, I think some of them have been suspect that like he is literally having he's running up to the line of directly negotiating with a PAC supporting him. That's not just supporting him through the coffers or through donations, big money donations. They're literally running his campaign.
Well, let's be real too. I mean, Trump's crossed this line a million times. He's doing it now where he donated some of the money he raised to his, Save America PAC, which is supposedly not associated with him. And now he's like, oh shit, I need that money back for legal
bills,
fees.
yeah.
So pay it back to my personal PAC, which supposedly has like contribution limits that are way below the millions of dollars in chunks that are being sent back to him from the supposedly independent PAC. Like, it's just disgusting. Right. It's just disgusting, gross corruption.
And what we really need to do is attack free speech, because the problem here is Citizens United, and like, what is the defense that those people said is, well, what are you going to do? Stop me from exercising my free speech? It's like, yeah, we should have publicly funded elections, and there should not be spending allowed outside those elections. Sorry if you have so much money in your bank account that you want to use it to influence the election. I'm not going to consider that speech. That's paid speech problem. That's not a free speech issue. And like, so many of our issues are bullshit and reaction and like sort of the conspiratorial not conspiratorial, but like the organized reaction against sort of liberation as free speech.
Yeah. Well, the idea that these right-wing libertarian psychos have been able to reframe spending money as speech. It's the same concept on Twitter right now.
Makes you think
that maybe speech is not really what they're interested in.
Yep.
Also wanted to highlight this. There was a report in POGO, which stands for, I believe, off the top, the Project on Government Oversight. Disturbing report, but this is a multi-year collection of data on ICE detention. Previously confidential records from within the Department of Homeland Security's DHS Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, that's CRCL, confirms years of inadequate medical care, extensive use of solitary confinement, mistreatment of transgender individuals, shortcomings in rape and sexual assault prevention and response, inaccessible services, and other problems disclosed by people detained by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The Project on Government Oversight is making dozens of these reports public after a nearly 5-year Freedom of Information Act legal battle ended with a judge ordering the department to release the records. So this is a result of around 5 years of battling to get this information out there. And many of it shouldn't shock you, but this is how we treat people trying to seek refuge and trying to immigrate into this country. As of this July, ICE was detaining over 30,000 people, a number that has doubled since President Joe Biden's inauguration, but decreased from a record high of 55,000 people detained under President Donald Trump in 2019. According to the American Immigration Council, people detained by ICE are overwhelmingly from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and other parts of Latin America. ICE's detention complex stretches across at least 120 facilities owned and operated by a mixture of companies and local, state, and federal agencies. And some of the details in here, about their lack of care, about the facilities and the assaults that happen in there. Obviously, as I said before, disturbing. Sexual assault while in ICE detention is a prevalent and ongoing problem. According to a report by Freedom for Immigrants, DHS's Office of Inspector General received over 33,000 complaints of sexual or physical abuse between January 2010 and July 2016, the period covered by the CRCL reports. Over 40% of those complaints were filed against ICE, more than any other DHS component. Of the 33,000 total complaints, DHS opened investigations into fewer than 1% of those reports. One of the previously confidential CRCL reports describes the sexual assault of a minor at the Carnes Detention Center in Texas. CRCL's report not only confirmed the assault, it also found that Carnes' policy of housing minors 12 years and older separately from their parents enabled the assault, and that ICE officials failed to respond appropriately once a report of the assault was made. So that is an acknowledgement that the separation of children increases the likelihood, naturally, that those children will get assaulted while in ICE custody. In their reports, CRCL experts frequently cite ICE's persistent language barriers with migrants, particularly indigenous migrants from Central America, as an aggravating factor in misconduct complaints. The report continues to talk about how there's just not language services. So the reporting of sexual assault, especially by minors, where they're not able to speak about what happened to them,
no comprende.
Silenced. Poor medical care for people being detained was a recurring theme in records obtained by Pogo. CRCL found examples that included detained individuals being transferred without their complete medical history, a senior medical administrator being unaware that they were even in charge, and an excessively high number of patients for the amount of staff available. According to CRCL's reports, at the Santa Ana City Jail in California, a transgender woman detained by ICE reported that staffers misgendered them and asked them uncomfortable questions about their transition. Patients were also made to wait, sometimes for months, for hormone replacement therapy because the only physician available visited the jail for just 4 hours each week. Another example of gender-affirming care, trans healthcare, being indelibly tied to and a part of medical rights in this country. Cleanliness was also a significant problem at some facilities, such as Stewart Detention Center. The medical clinic at Stewart was among the dirtiest medical spaces I have ever seen in a U.S. detention facility, one report said. We found pills on the floor in the hallways. At the West Texas detention facility, CRCL experts found numerous issues, including overcrowding, drinking water that wasn't clean, and, quote, extremely dirty and unsanitary conditions rife with rodents and insects. At the Crone Detention Center in Florida, CRCL documented medical staff force-feeding migrants on hunger strike. Force-feeding individuals on hunger strike has been condemned by the medical establishment and compared to torture by the UN Commission on Human Rights. And that happened in Florida. Obviously, we know the story that presidential candidate Ron DeSantis oversaw the usage of those tactics against Guantanamo Bay prisoners, and he was supposedly supposed to be there to stop that thing. That kind of practice, and he
was there to ensure that they were supposed to get proper treatment, and they were force-fed literally the drink Ensure.
Yep. The extensive, prolonged, and improper use of solitary confinement was frequently cited by CRCL investigators as a major deficiency at ICE facilities. Basically, they throw anybody in solitary confinement. Several people being detained at the West Texas detention facility told CRCL that they were afraid to seek out medical care because of the risk of being placed in medical isolation cells. Some who were placed in isolation because of suicide risks were held in solitary for prolonged periods of time, and the cells that they were held in are not suicide resistant. One story involved a migrant woman who was being deported without her child around the same time, and in the same region where the Trump administration quietly began its pilot family separation policy in the Border Patrol's El Paso, Texas sector. The detainee was placed on suicide watch on October 22nd, 2017, after reporting being deported without her daughter, the report states. You know, that's going to increase suicidal ideation when you're separated from your child. She remained on suicide watch in a suicide-resistant gown for 5 days. 3 days after thoughts of self-harm had dissipated.
What was it, that psycho military guy, I forget his name, was saying about Jews in the concentration camps and what you do when you're put into
General
circumstances?
Flynn.
Just like resist harder.
Yeah. This is a quote from a woman named Marlissa, a 22-year-old who describes her experience, and she's from the Bahamas. Being detained as an immigrant and having to fight for my freedom, I have faced discrimination based on my race. I have faced a lot of racism, a lot of disrespect, and a lot of unfairness in this system. I was threatened with solitary confinement after officers used racial slurs against me. Being detained, it's like you have no say and you have no rights. It's as if they look at you like you're beneath them, and the door is just being slammed in your face like you're an animal. I mean, I could go on and on here. I'd encourage everybody to read this report, as disturbing as it is, and I'm sure it was difficult to listen to. But we need to understand what ICE is and why it needs to be abolished. It is a criminalization. It is a warehousing of regular human beings seeking to improve their lives by coming to the United States.
We're separating people
and seeking refuge
for the deterrent effect. So like the incentive here are very perverse in that, like, the extent that these things are happening, there's part of the Border Patrol that's like, yeah, let them hear about it so they don't come.
Yeah. And they, but the effect, there's been no signs that have shown that the barbarity has a lasting effect on keeping people from coming.
Right.
It has some temporary effects when they hear that maybe they'll get separated from, their children. But for the most part, people will wait it out and then decide, look, I'm trying to improve my situation. I may be living in a country that has a ton of gang violence and my life is under threat. So it's a question of, am I going to stay here and have my life threatened, or am I going to take a risk and hope that I can get to the United States and be in a better situation and maybe be able to make a little bit more money that I can make here? And a lot of the violence in those countries is directly caused by U.S. policy in things like the drug war and
NAFTA.
And destabilization of democratically elected governments in those regions for decades because, capitalists in this country needed to get wealthy or even more wealthy.
And what we just need to do is expand the bureaucracy to allow people to seek refugee status here and help naturalize people.
Exactly.
They can be. Like, we have plenty of room for people. One of the reasons, if you look at it, why the American economy is so strong is in part because Biden has restarted getting migrants back into the country, and that labor is helping us significantly. It's probably not almost certainly, definitely isn't compensated the way it should be, but like that's just a reality. And like that combined with like labor unionizing is the way forward, but we can't really say that even as like a Democratic Party. We need more in the party to say like this is good and this is the way forward.
Biden's been terrible on the
exactly,
border.
and not running away from it and saying actually we're the tough on the border guys.
Yeah, he's terrified of being called soft in that way. And the Democrats, it reminds me of like, don't say abortion, don't say abortion.
Exactly.
Come up with a counter narrative until it gets so horrific that we are in a place where, I don't know, we reach such a bottom that there has to be some action. But then you've completely greased the wheels for the right-wing fascist narrative. Come up with a counter-narrative now, the Democratic Party, and don't just do these quiet court cases against Abbott in the shadows. Biden should be out front using the bully pulpit, talking about the Republican barbarity. You think the average American wants a mother who's pregnant, tangled and in barbed wire, bleeding to death in the Rio Grande? You think that people are really interested in that? Do you think that when they hear these stories about what detention's actually like, that they would back that? I don't think so.
And if they do, we should make it clear that they do.
And if they do, they're not voting for the Democrats anyway. Okay? So they're just fascists, and they're going to go with the right no matter what. ICE does not need to exist. It was a post 9/11 creation. It is not a part of the founding document. It is a part of our government that we could do away with easily. And it could become a much more robust process that Matt describes of bringing people in through checkpoints, documenting their names, where they're planning on living. This is the status. This is how you can get naturalized. This is how you can get become a citizen. This is how you can seek refuge here. This is the legal process. And come to your court date. And if they don't come to their court date, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. That's the reality. And this is just going to get worse and worse with climate change. There's going to be more and more migration from other parts of the world to areas where there's more wealth and potentially better conditions weather-wise. And so it just needs to... We're going to look back in 10 years at this threadbare and barbaric process and say, gosh, why did we not act sooner to create some sort of real system here?
Well, and like the big problem is like we decided to do all this like the NAFTA stuff, particularly at a time where labor was extremely weak. And there's a book, The Children of NAFTA, it came out like 20 years ago. But it's the missed opportunity is that the way to deal with this situation of like labor not undermining wages is to unionize. Like, because guess what? Like Mexico have some labor protections. Surprise, child labor not legal there either. It's only when you get into the realms of like illegality and people not given full citizen rights where you're allowed to become exploiters of child labor.
And that's what they want. That's exactly why Sarah Huckabee Sanders just signed that law in Arkansas that says, we're just going to loosen paperwork requirements for child labor at meatpacking plants.
Yeah.
Why would that be the case?
They want that because they want that labor to continue. That really, like, I mean, I know but like just so people get spelled out like that, what that does is incentivize more illegal immigration, but just under the cover of night so that it can go straight into a factory and get their hands cut off.
And you know why, too? They like that their situation is as precarious as possible.
Exactly.
Capitalist bosses want those kids to be desperate so that they come into the meatpacking plant and clean the blades and the blood at 4 a.m.
And you behave yourself and don't get uppity. I mean, that's why doing this with cops like ICE instead of labor protections like unions is it's a way to serve the bosses, because the boss can say like, oh, you're going to complain about me putting your 8-year-old in that sausage grinder when it was not unplugged, but it's off. Well, you complain. I'm going to make a phone call to Donald Trump's ICE, and you're going to be out of here. And like, and we haven't seen like, if you really wanted to deal with this, you would see these like Tyson CEOs or whoever these CEOs are that run these companies that exploit this labor. They'd be going to jail themselves, and then everybody that they exploited would be given citizenship because they were exploited by American capitalists.
Yeah. The right is invested in creating a permanent underclass of workers that undercuts union labor and that they can use to pay below minimum wage, and that includes children. I know we're just restating what we said, but
it's in your backyard. It's in the chicken factory down the road. Like, it's going on, and it's horrible.
With that said, Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning? We're going to wrap up the first hour of this program. I mean, that was certainly not the fun half. We'll actually have some fun, I think.
I had a lot of fun, David and I, with a Minion Death Cult for our Patreon episode, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We talked both about the if they're seeing DeSantis guys in the comment sections of right-wing media, and it turns out not really, and not seeing a lot of Vivek guys. Definitely not seeing any Doug Burgum guys. But we also talked about the UPS Teamsters vote, why, despite it being a definite step forward and exciting, voting no is a way to maybe see if there's more fight and more that can be extracted from this contract. So we'll see what this outcome of the vote is actually tonight, I think. But yeah, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We also have Branko Marcetic on to talk about doing a little look at what the squad has actually accomplished on the left. So going to be a little bit positive. People think we're a little bit too negative on the Democrats and the squad. Well, tonight is your night on Left Reckoning. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
You don't think they're sellout shells?
I mean, I don't know that I did donate to Ilhan Omar. I don't necessarily like that AOC shares money with people like Katie Porter or whatever. That's a sore spot for me. But as far as like denying that, like they are accomplishing relatively more than, say, I don't know, Tulsi Gabbard or RFK or whatever other moron opportunists other people like to put forward, I think is just, it's not realistic. So, we're going to try to we're going to have sympathy for the squad tonight. Left Reckoning.
Sympathy for the squad. All right. Also, on ESPN, we gave an update on the Michael Orr story, the absolute insanity there. We talked about the crazy, honestly, sexual assault of one of the female soccer players who won the World Cup in Spain by one of the guys at the top, just kissed her on the mouth without her consent on camera as they were getting they're celebrating their World Cup victory, and just the history of sexism in that program. As well as we gave a little bit of some early preseason reaction, stock up, stock down, and took some calls youtube.com/ESVN show. All right, guys, gonna head into the fun half. Like this stream, subscribe to the Majority Report if you haven't already, and become a member. Join themajorityreport.com. We would greatly appreciate it. All right, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. It is the fun half of the Majority Reports. The phone lines are open. 646-257-3920. Left or bereft? I had a conversation with a friend recently who was relatively uninformed. We briefly talked about immigration, and she said, I think we just need to make it harder and it'll be fine. And I was so baffled. I was speechless. Her parents are right-wingers, and she's done a lot to move away from their thinking, but this is an example of what normal people who don't pay much attention think. This is evidence of a huge gap in narrative. We let the right define the migrant conversation, and it leads to the described horror. Democrats need to grow a spine and address this. I can't think of a bigger slam dunk for Joe Biden than we are getting rid of razor wire and the filth water.
Well, I mean, it's funny, like the book, the Children of NAFTA book, and there's another one on border games that I read. It talks about like the 90s, the sort of awkwardness of like Bill Clinton being attacked on being weak on the border and actually saying, I'm hiring a bunch of border cops, actually.
Right.
And then also, this was in the direct shadow of Mr. Gorbachev tear down that wall. And kind of the contradiction there was a little bit too poignant for us to actually like do wall building.
Tear down this wall and build this one.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like it's wild how empty actually like supposed principles are.
Yeah, right.
Like well, we hate walls, and now it's build that wall.
Yep. Love You Bye said, "Hi, Emma and crew. Speaking of the evils of capitalism, I recently saw a Nike sign that said, 'Uncoachable kids become unemployable adults. Let your kids get used to someone being tough on them. It's life.' I thought the sentiment was disgusting, but I know a few of youth coaches that fully agree. What are your thoughts?"
Well, I think
I mean, tough coaching sometimes is good, but
coaching is very vital. But also, like I grew up with the toxic versions of this, which I've literally met Bobby Knight twice.
Mhm.
The guy who choked a player and threw chairs onto the court. Also Bear Bryant, the Texas A&M coach from way back in the day when I can't remember what the race politics of that was, if they were integrated or not, but I do know that the dehydration politics were horrible, and that like we're in the middle of Texas and there's not water breaks and stuff like that, and it's all because this is like a military style idea, and that stuff is really gross. But like there's also, I mean, we're maybe getting a little bit too into sports, but like coaching is, you hear anybody who really excelled in sports, and the knowledge transfer is extremely important. And I know I excelled in sports early on because my dad was often coach, and I had a bunch of time to work in like gyms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that despite like basically being the same size as other people, I like had a mental advantage that went away as I like started playing more video games and stuff like that. But like that stuff is really important, and I mean, it's Nike, so ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, it is a little bit of that grind set thing, but I will say the less labor power that the athletes in those situations have, the more they're going to be exploited. I mean, you kind of saw this in Urban Meyer, longtime Ohio State. Well, he was with Tebow in Florida, and then he was at Ohio State. He went and transitioned to the NFL with the Jaguars, and he kicked one of his kickers while he was warming up. Basically assaulted him and screamed at him and was like, "Don't miss your effing kicks" and stuff. And the kicker complained. And that only came out a few months later when the team was horrible and there were a bunch of other scandals about how unprofessional Urban Meyer was. But that is an example of like the kicker has at least some power to complain because he is an employee and has a wage. College athletes, high school athletes, no power. None. It's slightly getting better with NIL money, but that's still not a wage being paid by the college for your labor.
And competition drives you to exert yourself in extreme weather conditions in ways that are probably not healthy. And kids die. I mean, kids die playing football. I'd probably want to look that up, but I imagine more kids die in football, like spring training or boot or what do they call it before the season, than any other sport. But maybe
I mean, so yes, that's a problem, but I do think it's changing. Like even Bill Belichick's style of coaching is wearing thin. It's getting a little bit more.
And part of that is just like relative to 40 years ago, athletes just have more power, mainly at the top, but it trickles down in a weird way.
Let's do this Kansas clip really quickly, just because I wanted to update people. So we covered this, I believe, last week. The police raid on a local paper in Kansas, in Marion County. The reasons for the raid and the seizure of this small mom and pop paper's computers and material, it's still unclear to an extent. It does seem to center around the DUI arrest of a local restaurateur woman who is described as well connected. Now, how well connected is she with the cops? What is her personal relationship with a cop? Or a few of them? I don't really know. That's not been reported yet. it seems like there's some subtext there. She
And-
must have some personal relationship.
And also, there's been some additional reporting since that when those record requests were obtained, and the police department alleged that they were potentially requested under false pretenses, like they were alleging that the reporter impersonated someone to obtain the records, which they have. I believe that the Marion County Record has proof that they did not do that, so that seems to be in dispute. But also, the police chief for Marion County, or for that enforced this warrant, was removed from the Kansas City Police Department due to his own history of misconduct on the police force there. And the judge who signed off on the warrant has her own history of DUI arrests herself. So that all of that is kind of disparate information, but one could potentially think that maybe there was some concern about this local newspaper digging too far into people's pasts about
With
their
DUIs,
their own records in their prior histories.
Law enforcement's like, this is the DUI town. You're not going to stop us from drinking and driving. Local paper.
Hey, stop looking into that, okay?
And
there's nothing to see, but just don't look into we got it.
Yeah, we got it totally. And the story is very dark, but there is some kind of hilarious irony in the fact that this woman, Carrie Newell, this raid, it was supposedly happening to make sure that her DUI arrest didn't come out, and now it's this national story about this raid happening on behalf of her DUI arrest. But this is the footage of the raid, and you'll see the 98-year-old woman who owns this paper, who later died from, when her son attributes it to the stress of the situation.
Glenn Greenwald raising his eyebrow, saying, "No, there's probably an elite lie."
I'm sure. I'm sure, but this is their home, and a bunch of cops just came in. Of course, that's going to cause stress.
Yes, this causes heart attacks. It's a well-known phenomenon.
Well, completely. But this is the footage here, and you'll see just how small time this paper is, and how insane it is that they use these tactics.
Meyer, right?
Yes.
Calling Eric Meyer.
Don't you touch any of that stuff.
Ma'am.
This is my house.
I know. You're wasting your breath. Ma'am.
Get out of here.
Pigs.
You asshole.
Yeah, get them.
We'll be out of here.
Love this woman.
Pretty quick.
Get them out of here. They're here. You done.
This is a visit from the Goon Squad. Get their asses.
You love your mother. You're an asshole. Police chief. You're the chief. Oh, God. Get out of my house. You're patrol. Get out. Stand outside. You can stand outside that door and you still see them. I don't want you in my house. I don't want you. You do not take them. What?
That's some business class route, or how's that?
What?
Leave a message after.
Is there another one downstairs, another computer?
Thank you.
We never went down there, and he stayed up here the whole time.
Well, that was yeah. What's he doing over there going through the papers?
How many computers do you have in the house, man?
I'm not going to tell you. Get out of my way.
It's all right.
I want to see what they're doing.
Well, they're working.
I don't care what they're
So you
doing.
can go on through if you want.
What are you doing? Those are personal papers.
Man, those aren't papers, they're electronic devices, which is what the judge said that we're supposed to take. Okay?
The tone that this
The
Gestapo
condescension, disgusting. I mean, good for her. She went out like a champ.
I'll just remind people that when the precinct burned down in Minneapolis, that over half of Americans said that was good because they deserved it.
I mean, that footage is really angering. I mean, I'm also happy that she went out like a fighter. She really did, and
I mean, that's an American hero.
Totally, and her calling them those pigs, assholes to their faces was lovely to see.
Well,
but at the same time, like, they say she was in good health at that time, and you can see the stress. You can see the stress.
She's
and
98
hear it
years
in her
old.
voice.
She's
98 years old, having to confront cops with her walker as they go through her personal
Alone.
belongings.
She's alone. She's calling her son.
Trying to call her son and contact him. And I mean, man, the fact that this footage exists is a good thing. But these kinds of police abuses happen regularly. They're maybe a little less egregious or don't have this exact freedom of the press angle always, but cops, just the impulse for the cops to try to bury DUIs. How many cops do you think drunk drive in America?
Get let off by their buddies.
My guess would be a lot.
Right, and there's another thing. I saw this black kid, was taking out the trash and got arrested for like a few minutes because they thought he matched the description. And that is just, I mean, I've never had that experience. I've had experience with the cops for like speeding and stuff like that, but I've never been profiled and detained by them for the wrong reason. And like, especially that happening to a young kid, it's absolutely traumatizing. So you do this sort of crap to like a 98-year-old and they die. And of course, like cops are going to not, man, I mean, to act like there wasn't a connection between her death here and them raiding them, I think is just as despicable as cop shit gets.
Yeah. Al Dente says, "What's the degree of difficulty and monetary maximum for a wrongful death lawsuits in Kansas?" I do not know.
I mean, police departments are going bankrupt if we start prosecuting them for the trauma that they create in communities.
Yeah.
Like the externalities of that should be apparent to most people now, and that's why like police abolitionists are closer, I think, to it than maybe like police apologists are. Like they'd go absolutely bankrupt. The only way that this might happen is because she like owned a newspaper, and this is very high profile. But yeah, they cause this kind of damage all the time.
Yeah. Steely Dan Arcade, you think you know a guy. I thought DeSantis was a hate-filled monster for the love of the game, but it was all just about the money. Yeah. Antonin Scalia's Ghost, we love video games, Matt. No need to be ashamed of sacrificing sports for video games.
I mean, DeSantis, he barely beat Gillum.
Yeah.
And so they've been they've been desperate money grubbing mode. I mean, he had to overturn their felon reenfranchisement stuff. Like, he's not like, his strength is, I think, overstated to an extent, and is in part like capable of doing so because the Democratic Party there is completely, a mess.
Fart Twain, my wife beat me in chess last night. I told her this shouldn't happen as I have a larger brain, and now she won't talk to me. What do I do? I mean, maybe Riley Gaines will chat with you.
Watch a YouTuber and talk about how men are being left behind by feminism.
That's the loneliness epidemic.
Yeah, and just watch more YouTube.
Oliver Wendell Homeslice, since Twitter is now X, you do not tweet, you excrete. Okay, well, it's Twitter and tweets. That's what we've decided. Dave from Jamaica, no walls for white people, I guess. Huh. Okay, let's take a call here. Calling from a 916 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this you?
This is you. Is this you? Well
this
done.
This is Billy from Sacramento. Hi.
Hi, Billy. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I don't know if you remember me calling before. Trans lady, she, her.
Oh, I do, Billy.
You.
So good to hear from you.
Yeah, hi.
I do remember your call. You told that amazing story about going to the nail salon, right? And what that was a wonderful, wonderful call. Thanks for calling back in.
Thank you. I have more good news.
Great.
First is yesterday I got an email that said, "Hey, your student loan's forgiven," and I was like, "What?
What?
Is this real?" I looked at the header; it was real. I looked through everything; it was real. I logged into my account, not through the email, because at that point I still didn't trust it.
Smart.
And my account is zeroed out for Mohila. It's gone. I have no debt.
Go on.
And it credited Biden. It said Biden and Harris administration did this, that, and the other, and you don't owe us any money anymore. Have a good day.
So are you, Billy, how long have you been paying student loans?
I don't know.
Is it 20 years?
Since,
because I believe that's the eligibility.
Yeah, it's been that long. Yeah.
Then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they essentially are forgiving loans for 800,000 borrowers, I believe, who have been paying monthly for over 20 years, and I guess who still have a significant amount of debt. So you might be one of the very lucky 800,000.
Apparently, like I had like at least 10K left sitting there, and it's gone. And I'm still in shock. I do not know what to do. I'm expecting my mailbox to be full of obnoxious credit card offers now.
But that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And like I went online. I was like, "Is this happening to other people?" And apparently, it's been happening for like a week.
Yep,
like,
we headlined it.
I've seen other reports.
But the fact. Look, it is not ideal in the sense that we wanted blanket debt forgiveness. Biden tried to means test it even, and then the Supreme Court struck it down. But the piecemeal stuff.
I'm not gonna look a gift horse in the mouth.
I'm thrilled to hear about this.
I'm excited for me and others, but I still think there needs to be much more. Like Biden didn't earn my vote with this. I'm not that easy, but I'm happy with it.
Well,
and
that's good for you, caller, but it's bad for me because when I see somebody get their debt relieved and I still have my debt, it makes me vote Republican. So we cancel each other out now. I'm sorry. This is an anti-Biden show.
Yep.
Biden has lost my vote, so you better vote for him. Because,
Matt's debt doesn't even mean anything anymore.
I'm twitching. My eye is twitching how mad I am that I'm seeing somebody else benefit when I am not benefiting. So I'm so angry. But thank you for calling in so I know how much of a traitor Joe Biden is.
Billy, you made Matt leave the left.
I totally get the petty vote. I get the petty vote. That's perfectly fine.
I'm a taxpayer.
One other bit of good news. One other bit of good news for me is in a few hours, I'm going to be seeing a lawyer about the first steps of getting my name and gender legally changed. And I'm pretty fucking
Look at what getting people out from debt bondage does for their actual personal freedom.
There you go.
It's almost as if there's a direct connection between users suppressing an entire generation of people who can't afford their own education and need to go to banks for it. And then getting rid of that usurious relationship and seeing people live their best lives. So thank you so much for calling in about that.
Yeah, are you? This is your year.
It's in so many more ways than one. Holy shit! Like my hormone replacement therapy has reached a new step. I'm on progesterone, and it's doing wonders for my mental friggin' health. Someone in the Discord said everything's coming up billion. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it is. I'm going to fucking own that.
Hell yeah. All right, Billy. Well, great to hear from you, and I'm so glad it's such positive news.
Yeah, I'm glad I could share it. You guys have a fun half. At least try to.
All right, we will. That'll be our mission for the next clip.
All right, left is best, as everyone says, like weirdo religious people now.
Yeah. Yes, left is best. Bye.
Okay, bye guys.
It is funny how I had to think about that to get to that point of oh yeah, people say they'll resent a situation.
I mean, I'm just so happy for Billy, but then
awesome, yeah.
There are other people that's not fair to me, even though it has no connection to my personal experience. Yeah. That impulse is something that should be stamped out, but it's also cult of individualism in the United States.
It's like you've been creased against humanity when that's your reaction, and you need to crease it the other way and work on that immediately.
Let's do something fun here. What's a good clip? Should we do Trump saying he might defect to Russia? What number is this? Number 5. Okay. I did not even see this yet. Number 5? 7. There we go. So I said this last week that there's a non-zero chance that Trump defects or flees and seeks refuge in a country that's more favorable to him, that will protect him. I mean, Putin certainly, I think, would. I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
I think Putin's insane. And I think like the thought that'd be a funny, buddy comedy or something like that, where Trump has to go to Russia and Putin's like, oh, what if I got myself into?
And then the power dynamic flips, right? Where then he has to kind of suck up to Putin in order to just maintain his. I don't know if that would be honestly sustainable for him to maintain his freedom. But does he have a golf course in Russia?
I'm sure there's got to be some golf in Russia.
He might go to one of those, Qatar mega golf courses that he ends up building. But I know that there's still, he would have to go somewhere that's more antagonistic to the United States. We should do a snake draft of countries that Trump might defect to. But I cannot believe he acknowledged this. Here he said on Truthing Away, the failed district attorney of Fulton County, Atlanta.
Thanks.
Fannie Willis.
Which I knew.
Fannie Willis,
Fannie
folks.
Willis. Is she failed or is she currently in her
Phony Fannie, folks.
In her role? What's the failed part? But whatever. Insisted on a $200,000 bond from me. I assumed, therefore, that she thought I was a flight risk. I'd fly far away, maybe to Russia, or share a gold domed suite with Vladimir. Oh. We're on a first name basis. Also, it's pretty homoerotic, but okay. Getting dome with Vladimir. Never to be seen or heard from again. Would I be able to take my very understated airplane with the gold Trump affix for all to see? Probably not. I'd be much better off flying commercial. I'm sure nobody would recognize me. So he's engaging with this thought, even if it's in a humorous way.
$200,000, is that enough? Like, I feel like if she was really worried about this, it would be more than that.
I just don't think that the Fulton County DA has the ability, and I don't know what the precedent is, but they're probably trying to remain within some sort of precedent for crimes like this in terms of what they're setting for their bond.
On the next JetBlue flight to Moscow, 2 kids in a trench coat, and it's Trump.
Gosh, he would leave Melania and all of them behind in a second and start a new life. Only kid he'd miss is Ivanka.
I can't handicap the outcomes here, but I do think it's more likely that he leaves the country than because he
goes to prison. What's more likely? That's the game. Does Trump go to prison or leave the country? I think more goes to prison in the end.
Because ultimately, I think it'd be too difficult for him to go into exile. Like, he's got too much golf courses and stuff here.
But he has many golf courses internationally. That's the thing. He does
go to Ireland,
but they're all in countries. Are they? How many of them are in countries that
are hostile to the United States? That's the question.
Yeah.
We would have to find some sort of heat map for Trump courses. But man, it would be fat. He's. I will say this. He'll definitely consider it. And we'll have some article that comes out if he ends up getting convicted. Seems like, at least in the Jack Smith case, I can't see that not happening. But
we're definitely going to see some.
Happened.
We're definitely going to see some sober New York Times headline from Maggie Haberman and Michael Schmidt or whoever it is over there, being like, Trump speculated about defecting to Oman.
Yeah, three sources tell us that he called the Prince of blah blah blah.
He called Prince Abdullah of Jordan to see if he could stay in his palace while he was.
How much longer does he have left? But he's got to. I say this because it's just a logical thing to say, but he's got to worry about his family too.
No. No, he doesn't. And Ivanka and Jared they're not named at all in any of this election stuff. None of the Trump kids are. He kept the kids, his only act of fatherly love was keeping the kids out of the coup plot. Dr. Dragon Rider, when Matt says he was falsely identified, it was an outstanding warrant for John Oates of Holland Oates. The mustache is to blame.
I was not falsely identified.
Phineas Erb, a former president, will not go to prison. The worst will be house arrest. The logistics of Secret Service in prison wouldn't make sense.
House arrest. I think that
could be a good middle ground.
Yeah, that does make the most sense. I mean, I think they should put him in the exact same cell that Epstein was held in. But
that would be poetic. But I just think. But house arrest for him is just being at Mar-a-Lago. That's not a punishment. You can still golf there. 2 kids in a trench coat. Bradley, Trump, and I would never fly JetBlue. It's Qatar first class, or we aren't going. 0 billionaires. I work for Maximus doing military benefits and support full cancellation of all the debt. They laid off 700 workers trying to unionize in their healthcare sector of work. They have cut our performance bonuses for everyone. No raises for 3 years. We make about $18 an hour and have to pay for internet to work from home over $100 a month.
Wow.
Cops and military members constantly email begging for forgiveness. The benefits are a joke and have been such a complicated, messy process. The whole job is a joke. Yeah, I'm sorry you have to deal with that. Noble Villain, thank you for pointing out Tyson specifically. I live in a town with their factory, and the damage they have caused is immeasurable. It's basically a company town in shambles with more police officers than businesses.
Yeah, I had to stop eating bird's eye after I read into, actually in the Children of NAFTA book, that's specifically a union-busting organization in the wake of NAFTA. But these big food processors, like, you know, the health stuff is one thing, but really the labor stuff is how, like, you can barely walk down the aisle of your grocery store without crossing something that is basically evidence of a crime.
Poli Sci Guy 1123, did you guys see the news? DeSantis' PAC chair claimed he had a business degree, but what he had was a training certificate from the Sizzler he worked at when he was 19.
I count it. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm not a credentialist.
But funny little, still funny anecdote,
School of the
I
streets.
would say. Calling from a 915 area code. This is where you're calling from. 915.
915.
915. Going once.
Is it 951?
Oh, sorry. 951. 951.
Okay.
My bad.
No worries. I was like, okay, maybe they're reading it like a dyslexic person, but it's all good.
Like one? I mean, we'll see.
As one.
Jury's still out. Aaliyah, is that, I think I have your name written down here. Who's this where you're calling from?
Yeah, it's Alia.
Alia, sorry.
From California. No worries. It's not one that most people would know. So I've been talking to somebody who lives in a country that rhymes with Smusha. This was a while ago that they mentioned it. But, basically with factories being completely driven towards, like, the military function for the war in Ukraine, planes have been breaking down. I'm sure, like, some of you know, like, people can't just, like, get on a plane, partially due to the sanctions, but also because of, they just don't have enough machines to keep the planes from, like, breaking down before their flight, so they constantly have to keep them. Basically, what I'm saying is their manufacturing production is not it's not up to just even what civilians need, let alone just being unable to acquire machine parts from other countries due to the sanctions. So I think there's a lot of, besides just discontent from the war directly affecting families, there's also discontent from the sanctions just affecting their everyday life, just even exist. This person literally says that, that they've always, like, disliked Putin, but, like, will just have said to me, even on the phone or in text, like, that they, the only thing that will basically end this is, with Putin dead, that they hope for this, which is very unsafe of them. They say that, they don't understand English, but, apparatus that was ran by a former KGB agent, that does not, I don't think that bodes well to say it openly. Thankfully,
I wouldn't.
They don't mention it a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
And they also mentioned that I think with enough discontent, and also the fact that Prigozhin threw a shot across the bow. Now, of course, Prigozhin is a fucking monster. Sorry for cursing. But they also mentioned that, Russia is barely held together by fear. And the idea that, there are still Soviet states that are connected to Russia, or former Soviet states that are, under the thumb of Putin, that are connected to Russia, there might be a further disalignment. I think that's very important because the more we provide military weapons to Ukraine and more volunteer soldiers go there, I think that means it's a likely event that this could spell a downfall. Unfortunately, as much as I want the war to end, as much as I'd like the sanctions to end because of, the person I care about there and other people who are in fear of their lives that have to, hide their true feelings in public and their true selves, this war, unfortunately, will have to be a forever war until either the oligarchs decide to remove him or there's a fracture point that creates its own civil war, which none of those are good things. And
no, right. I mean, you mentioned that. Look, sanctions are do have effects for the people on the ground. I mean, that is the stated purpose, and not everybody in Russia is on board with the war effort, and not even close to everybody. And I find in the Western press the dehumanization of regular Russian people, Chinese people as well, because they are casualties in the narrative that we build against certain antagonists. Although in terms of the way that Russia is engaging in its invasion of Ukraine, they're doing a pretty good job of creating horrible PR for themselves. But we have to know, and we have to maintain the discipline to not blame regular people for what the powerful do, in the same way that we wouldn't want every American to be dismissed or gone after because of, say, the actions in the Iraq War. I just want us to still maintain that posture towards just an average Russian person.
Agreed. And I do want to mention, specifically because you mentioned China and the same thing, I feel the exact same way. I'm not a fan of the Chinese government. And specifically recently, they just disappeared, or she has disappeared, Naomi Wu. And the story is not getting traction. I don't know if you've heard of it. The internet kind of the TikToker person. YouTuber. Yeah, YouTuber. Yeah, she used to work for the Linux help support tech YouTube side or channel. I don't remember. It's minus something. Yeah, this was a while ago. She had mentioned potential sexual harassment or assault that was going on there, or sexism. I don't remember which of the three, but I know it's one of those. And they, but nobody can find her. Nobody knows where she is. The American media has primarily been negligent regarding this. They haven't really mentioned anything. And, that's, because we cozy up with China. And I understand why. Part of it is because the more of an antagonist nation that you work with on both economic and social aspects, the harder it is to to be more antagonistic, even if the antagonism could be warranted.
The antagonism towards China is warranted?
Well, I'm talking about specifically regarding socially. China as in like their disappearance.
I don't agree with
I mean,
that.
I mean, how this stuff gets played out in international great power politics is that like when we have concerns, it's basically like just used for prestige and coalition building with the rest of the world. So like
we have a coalition. We work with Saudi Arabia
Like-
regularly. We are allies with Egypt, and I mean none of these are moral black and white situations. They're all based in incentives for the countries. And we're incredibly hawkish on China right now. I mean, Biden just.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Okay. Well, we've gone on a little bit too long anyway, but I appreciate the call and the story for sure about your Russian friend. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And I have one quick.
Oh, okay. There was a bit of. I'm pressed hang up earlier and it was a little delay, so I didn't mean to cut you off.
I mean, with regards to like the ruble fell and Putin had to raise interest rates, and that was one thing. Like a few months ago, it had looked like the Russian economy had sort of transitioned in on a more solidly onto this wartime footing, which was not a good sign for like if both sides are basically like, oh yeah, this actually serves our economy, we can just roll this low level conflict that's killing thousands and thousands and thousands of people, but that I think it is I don't think it's good for Russia that the ruble fell, and I think it probably changes the way that some of the countries that are neutral are looking at this, especially if that persists. Who knows how? I mean, maybe the economy, the interest rates or whatever, stabilize the economy. Who knows? Like these things are extremely difficult for me to predict. So all I try to do is like react to what smarter people are saying about it. But yeah.
Let's do this Charlie Kirk clip here. Charlie Kirk on his show yesterday speaking about the 14th Amendment, and he's being critical of it. A reminder that the 14th Amendment was passed in the wake of the Civil War. It is one of the efforts at Reconstruction, giving essentially protections to former slaves and allowing them to be at least nominally full citizens under the law. And this is Charlie Kirk's take on the 14th Amendment.
So here's what it says on The Atlantic. The Constitution prohibits Trump from ever being president again. By Michael Luttig and Lawrence Tribe. Now, Lawrence Tribe is a crazy person, but he's actually well respected on the left, which is telling. As students of the United States Constitution for many decades, one of a U.S. Court of Appeals judge, the other as a professor of constitutional law, and both as constitutional advocates, scholars, and practitioners, we long ago came to the conclusion that the 14th Amendment, the amendment ratified in 1868 that represents our nation's second founding, a new birth of freedom, contains within a protection against the dissolution of the republic by a treasonous president. Okay, let's just slow down. The 14th Amendment was necessary for some things, 100%, but it's way too broadly written. It's sloppily written in some ways. The moral premise of the 14th Amendment, excellent. Of course, obviously, no one's going to debate that. No one will. Abolishing slavery and respecting the dignity of all people. But they float the 14th Amendment for everything. For removal of debts. Remember when they said, oh, the debt ceiling can be raised because of the 14th Amendment? Preventing Donald Trump from becoming president, birthright citizenship. The 14th Amendment is the catch-all. The 14th Amendment has become kind of the modern Marxist revolutionary gateway to whatever they want to do. It doesn't always hold up in court, but it's way too broad. It's just too broad. Again, morally necessary with too many opaque provisions and vocabulary that is now harming us in 2023. They believe the 14th Amendment nullifies the rest of the Constitution as long as the government can be used to attack white people or now to attack insurrectionists. That's why language matters.
So, now he says at the end there that the 14th Amendment can be used to attack white people. It's just too broad. Like, look, I'm okay with the slavery thing ending, right? No one's going to argue that, except, you know, some of the white supremacist websites like Stormfront and stuff. You might take a little bit of a closer look, scratch beneath the surface. It won't be too much of a scratch to get to that point. It just went too far in certain instances. Because now they're coming after you. And I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about there, because this is apparently in reference, obviously, to the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection, not the Equal Protection Clause, but some of the parts of the 14th Amendment protecting the right for votes to be counted, for your vote to be heard, and for it to be counted as a part of elections, which was needed for black people who were newly emancipated and had now, at least on paper, and not in practice in the end, especially when Reconstruction was scrapped, but the right to vote. That is what the 14th Amendment was there to help solidify.
It also banned those who engaged in insurrection, quote, end quote, against the United States from holding any civil, military, or elected office without the approval of 2/3 of the House and Senate. The amendment prohibited former Confederate states from repaying war debts and compensating former slave owners for the emancipation of their enslaved people, finally, which is based. Finally, it granted Congress power to enforce this amendment, a provision that's the good government's power for the national government to have, a provision that led to passage of other landmark legislation in the 20th century, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So yeah, that's the communism, is that we let black people vote in addition to stopping slavery. And
the birthright citizenship element is what he would mention in the 14th Amendment, which is clearly delineated, and they say, you know, it's not valid. But
the attack on with the civil rights stuff, that Charlie and the people who sponsor him and have been sponsoring him straight out of high school, they believe that giving black people full civil rights in this country is an attack on white people because it dilutes their voting power.
Yeah, that's what he's saying there. And he's translating the attacks on Donald Trump, the righteous attacks on him for, you know, trying to overturn the democratic results of an election. That's why they're using the 14th Amendment, because it fits into the fake elector scheme, which would just do away with the will of the people. And Jack Smith's tact here is to say that this is a 14th Amendment violation because you're essentially putting a bunch of votes in the trash in favor of fake votes, fake electors that would put you into power. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I don't understand how you could have an objection to it in good faith. But the reality is that Charlie is trying to do what his predecessor, his idol Rush Limbaugh, would do, which would be to take this story and shoehorn it into how can we hate certain groups of people and say, you know, it's fine for them to have their rights. But look, it's gone way too far. The 14th Amendment, it was just too radical. And that is reactionary.
Well, yeah.
When you hear that, it's gone too far. That's definitionally reactionary. And you want to react to a point where we're pre 14th Amendment, we're talking like 1850. That's the reality that Charlie Kirk says, you know, we should be living in. The moral premise of the 14th Amendment, you know, that's okay. But it's putting it into practice. That's not okay. Then what does that mean? Not full civil rights for anybody except white guys. That's the Republican project too. Art Vandelay, the worst world conservative dum-dums like Kirk can imagine is the power of the state currently being leveraged against POC, particularly black people, being turned on them. Imagine a world where upper-class white communities were policed as aggressively as low-income ones. Kirk would be a police abolitionist in a heartbeat.
I mean, the truth is that this was a massive missed opportunity in this country. The Civil War was great, and then Lincoln got shot, and Reconstruction failed because we didn't occupy the South and enforce this stuff for multiple generations until we created until we bleached out the remnants of a sort of white supremacist the plantation society. And instead, like, those people just got to, after a short period, come back into power and help shape the future industrialization of America to the point where, like, they were a major coalition partner with FDR.
Right.
We should have occupied them. We should have been way more authoritarian as a state government. We didn't. Instead, we came together in, as one country again. And we're living in the problem of that ever since.
Not sure if you guys remember someone named Tucker Carlson, but God, it's honestly gratifying to see
it's so
him
funny.
flounder about.
Desperate for attention.
And no one's giving it to him because no one cares. Because he's not on Fox. It just shows how much the machine makes the man. It did for Bill O'Reilly before he was ousted for sexual harassment. And same thing for Tucker.
There were reports that either last week or the week before that he had published a book, and the book sales were anemic. Like he got something like a few thousand book sales his first week. Like as you said with the machine makes the man, or sort of the medium is the message type thing. We sort of were potentially a little concerned that Tucker might still have that reach, but without the time slot, he became basically nothing.
Which is so gratifying. I gotta be honest with you, because I would love to hear his internal dialogue as it relates to his complete lack of relevance at this point. I mean, I don't know. He's probably swimming in so much money. That dulls the senses to a degree, but he interviewed Vivek Ramaswamy. What was his rap name? Davek, right? Davek. He interviewed Davek. See you out the trail on Tucker on Twitter. No one cares. But I just want to give a little bit of attention to Vivek because he's the only Republican that Trump seems to be speaking positively about. Yes? What?
I'll just say Tucker not looking very good.
Yeah, well. He could be some guy that Trump picks for something, right? I don't think VP is going to be.
There's not a whole lot of personnel like left over after the first administration and how it flamed out, and how a lot of people got burned. So yeah, you're going to need people. Some
just kind of like Ivy League libertarian ghoul who made a lot of money in his own right, who wants to rebrand himself. But this is him sitting and talking with Tucker about what he truly believes, especially because there was an Atlantic profile of him that came out a few days ago where he was quoted saying, how many federal agents were on the plane in 9/11, evoking some sort of like conspiracy theory about 9/11 being an inside job.
And the Wall Street Journal editorial board has released a few things calling into question his like investments and things that he's supported. Like, is he a member of the swamp or not? So that type of thing that he's responding to.
So here he is.
But why would the Wall Street Journal take time out of its busy schedule of defending low capital gains taxes to attack you over this?
What's interesting is you defend low capital gains taxes, you idiot. Tucker is so grating when he pretends to be a populist.
Yeah, he can't help even in the first breath still do the phony fake I'm a economic populist. The literal thing he said that Bill O'Reilly was doing 20 years ago.
Which never would matter whatsoever in practice, because the Republican Party that he supports fully and the nominees and the candidates that he fully supports all are in favor of lowering the capital gains tax 100%. All right.
But why would the Wall Street Journal take time out of its busy schedule of defending low capital gains taxes to attack you over this?
What's interesting is I think that there's a bipartisan consensus in this country right now that we, the people, we can't handle the truth. It's like Jack Nicholson at the end of the movie, right?
Yes.
You can't handle the truth. You need me on that wall. My basic view in this campaign is no, we don't need you on that wall. And yes, we can handle the truth. COVID-19, what was the origin? What did we know about the vaccines before we mandated them? What did we know about Hunter Biden's dealings before we systematically suppressed that story? What do we know about the truth of what happened on January 6th? What do we know about that Nashville shooter manifesto, the transgender individual who shot up a bunch of people in a Christian school? That's why I went to Nashville not that long ago, because Bill Lee, a Republican governor of Tennessee, now wants to pass a red flag law in Tennessee without releasing that manifesto. The whole point is the public can't handle the truth. And so I had offline discussions. I mean, we're talking with, big donors in the Republican Party, big folks in media, executives and otherwise, who said, hey, listen, okay, even if what you're saying is true, this is not helping you. You said, why is that the first question that should go through my mind, right? I mean, personally, I think the way I'm running this campaign is I'm not thinking about what's helping me or not before I say it. So far, at least that approach does seem to be helping me. Yes. We're doing all right.
Performance of.
But even if I were, I'd rather lose some election than to play some political snakes and ladders of what we're supposed to say.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really one of the questions at issue today, as it was in 1776. Do we believe that the public can be trusted with the truth? Whatever the truth is, just give me the hard truth. I mean, I have a friend of mine, her father died recently. She talked about actually her experience of her father having heart attacks even when she was a kid. He went on to live as far as he did. But she said the one thing she just wanted from the doctors, from her dad, et cetera, is, she's 12 years old at the time. I can handle the truth. Just tell me, is my dad going to die? Is my dad likely to die before he goes in for the next procedure? Don't just tell me he's going to live because you think that's what I need to hear. Just tell me the truth and I can handle the truth. I think most of us are this way. I think we as free human beings, what makes us human beings and not animals is the belief that we can believe in something bigger than ourselves and that we can handle the truth from those who are in power. And I think that's the moment we live in today. It was the moment of the American Revolution, that we, the people, can be trusted. And I think we now live in a moment where the government, and not just the government, but a broader establishment in our country, believes that citizens of this nation cannot be trusted with the truth.
So when you describe the way that...
All right. I'm not saying anything about truth to help my own candidacy or my campaign. No. But go to my website and buy my truth hats. Truth, period. That's the hat that he wears every single rally, and that's his merch. Talking about truths as eternal, and it's like, you know deep down what is true and what is pure. That's fascist talk.
Well, I mean, look, there's definitely a lot of obfuscation of truth going on in politics. That's certainly true. And I think the idea that it starts with the vaccine that actually saved lives. Say what you feel about the mRNA vaccine. And, I would say maybe the things that I have issue with is that it's still not free, the boosters, or it's not free anymore, I should say. But Vivek, here's the one thing that Tucker, and I just looked at the transcript for this entire 45-minute interview. I searched it on YouTube, so not at the actual source because I can't do it on Twitter. But nowhere did the words George Soros come up. And if you look at this Forbes article here from May 3rd, 2023, Wikipedia editor says they were paid to change Vivek Ramaswamy's page, and that is in relation to him getting a Soros Foundation grant to go through college at Yale. So I agree that people should be able to confront the truth, and we should not treat people like babies, that they're afraid. We should be able to trust them with information and not hide them from it because we're concerned about the way that they might receive it.
Per this piece, the changes include scrubbing the fact that Ramaswamy received the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans in 2011 and Ramaswamy's role in the Ohio COVID-19 response team.
Well, is that truth, Vivek? Come on, buddy.
It's like the movie, Tucker. It's like the movie.
Yeah, he's creating his own truth on Wikipedia. And I guess if you define truth as a falsified perception or portrayal of your record, then that is truth, but it's not actually true. And that's just kind of the danger of that rhetoric.
These principles are being simulated by the worst, most cynical people that completely work for the worst, the enemies. I mean,
it's the same thing with free speech.
Exactly.
It's kind of But the truth is really just what you feel in your bones. And I know what you feel in your bones. You feel that Mexicans are coming over to rape your kids over the border. That's what you feel. And that's true. And you shouldn't be able to be prevented by the Jack Nicholsons of the bipartisan consensus. Man, was that a convoluted way to get this point across. From saying that truth. And notice he says no facts. He just says what they're not telling you about the COVID vaccine.
Exactly.
They're not telling you about the trans shooter in Nashville, which again, dog whistles. There's no hard facts that he describes. What we would say are truths are that in this country, we have a health system that completely gouges you, and that's outcomes because of privatization are far behind other countries that have socialized medicine. What we say is that the child tax credit essentially cut child poverty by somewhere between 40 and 50% when it was implemented as a part of a response to COVID, and that we should make those things permanent. That is a truth. What we say is that gay rights are human rights, trans rights are human rights. Those are things that I feel are eternal truths. Or not just eternal, but the borne out by the facts. And
So why don't these guys get really concerned with shootings when a trans person might have done it or did it?
Yeah, and notice he even says there, like, he wants to put a red flag law in place, but he won't even. Can't even see the inner workings of the deranged trans shooter's mind. So that's the truth he's trying to hint at there. But
it's like Nazis talking about Jewish crimes.
yeah, right. Right. So, also Alex Jones said that Vivek was the new version of him. So, high praise from a truth teller, Alex Jones, who broke a record based on the amount that he had to pay out based on his lies.
That's because Alex Jones is a plant too. He's not, and people have been saying this since like the 90s about that guy. Like he is, he'll fundamentally, I mean, like, all the stuff we said about Vivek, which is going to become more apparent, because if you think for a second, like unless Vivek is just running to be a Trump stalking horse, if he gets any kind of momentum, Trump's going to crush him on that stuff, I think.
Yeah. All right, let's take another call here. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 702.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Hi, what's going on, everybody? It's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo, good to hear from you. How you doing?
Oh, Emma, it's been quite a journey. It's been quite a journey. By the way, Matt, you're spinning bars throughout this whole day today. You're saying a lot of good things.
Thanks.
I don't even know where to start. Let me just say it like this. You guys did an interview. I think you guys either interviewed her or you recommended a book, Jane McAlevey.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
No shortcuts in the gilded organizing.
Yeah.
No shortcuts. Yes. Great book. I'll put it to you this way. She cites in the book, in a lot of the labor movements, there were people like leftists and communists who actually got the people going, but eventually, they were stamped out, or, they might have been sidelined or marginalized in favor of more, people who are palatable. Am I making sense with that?
Yep.
For sure.
And I feel like I run into that. I run into that in a lot of ways.
Do tell.
With it, ooh, it's been a real struggle. It's been a real struggle. It's funny because, and again, shout out to Matt Leck, because he was like super poignant. He was like super prescient on this. There's a reason, there was a split in the Nevada caucus, between within the labor movement. The workers wanted Bernie.
Yeah.
The bosses wanted Hillary. There's a dichotomy there. You know what I'm saying? There's a tension there. And I feel like there's you know, this movement, but there's still remnants of like this. How can I put it? Like they don't want to fight. There's not a sense of urgency.
Right.
They've never worked out like that.
Interesting. For example, Matt, like I can't make this up. My boss, my managers have literally been setting me up on my floor. Oh, you've been failing rooms. You've been failing your rooms, bro, Flamingo. And they'll still sell the rooms regardless. My own organizer was telling me, bro, Flamingo, you can't be a union leader because you know, you have too many disciplinary infractions from management. Disgusting. Just think your opposition. You're believing management over me?
Right.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that sounds like a
What
fight
are
in
we
your
doing?
cat.
Exactly. Bingo. And I realized, oh, here's the tension. And by the way, what's funny is that when it's actually when you're in the trenches, like when you're actually in the trenches. Let me be clear, like fighting for workers, there's more of like a focus on how can I put this, like hand clapping and photo ops and everything is okay.
Yeah, recognition.
Exactly. Swear to God, I've been left for dead. But for example, though, they loved me when I brought in more members. You know what I'm saying? I'm a very charismatic guy. When I brought in more members for the union, what? I got them over like 20. That's like 1,000. That's like 1,000 in revenue every month. Love me then. When I'm actually getting heat and getting set up by my corporate bosses, oh, bro, Flamingo, you're a troublemaker. Interesting, very interesting.
Well, I don't want you to say too much more and reveal anything, but before we let you go, any advice for when people are dealing maybe something similar like what you're dealing with some entrenchment of, those kinds of voices?
Emma, it's a very strong question. I'll try to be concise, Emma, because again, I'm a true believer. You understand what I'm saying, Emma? So for me, this is almost like a reckoning. Like, oh, wait a minute. Not only am I dealing with management, I got to deal with these people.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? It's almost like I'm fighting a two-front war that I wasn't even aware of up until now.
Right.
I'll say this. In crisis, truth is revealed. This is just a truism of life, regardless of political affiliation or whatever. But what I realized is like, oh, because like I said, Emma, like this is becoming more and more true as I go through this journey of like, this is who I am. You know, this is what oh, for you, this is a job. Me, I'm a true believer. We're not the same. And look, this might rub people the wrong way in life. And don't get me wrong. Of course, there's niceties, and you do this in roundabout ways. You're not that confrontational. But what you end up realizing is like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I'm at the forefront of like, I really believe this stuff. So I got to be the one. You know what I'm saying? I'm almost on my own. There's only a few people in the field like me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
in my sense.
Yeah.
Like so when I talk to Emma, when I'm talking to Matt or other people, it's like, oh, because otherwise, for the 90%, it's entertainment, or I'll get another job tomorrow. I don't care. Blah blah blah. But for us, it's like, oh, wait a minute, and you just realize even within your own organization, just like, oh, you're gonna face opposition. So the only thing I could just be prepared. And just take it from me. You know what I'm saying? Don't get caught in that moment where you're like, oh, I'm the sucker. You ever say, oh, wait, I'm the sucker like everybody else? Like I wasn't in on the joke. But understand, there's people who really like, look, there's peace with dignity. I get it. That's what the union is here for. I get it. This peace with dignity. Understood. But connect me with people who are ready to take the spear and be like, oh yeah, I'm ready for worker empowerment. I get it. You got a job to do. Me, I'm ready.
Yeah, bro, we gotta go. But I mean, on as we do, thanks for the call.
Appreciate it.
Talking about the Teamsters and UPS vote here, and you got a lot of people who I think it's interesting because I think early on there was a lot of talk like the part-timers aren't going to have any appetite, and they don't have any sort of sort of institutional knowledge of solidarity, and that is something that especially in a and it turned out that they had more, I think, than we thought. I mean, we'll find out, but it seems like that wasn't true. But that is definitely something people have to deal with, which is that, I mean, there's the posture of unions for the last 50 years has not been on the march. It's been defensive and maintenance one. And so that,
those change in tactics.
Exactly. And that sort of muscle memory isn't there. It hasn't been built. And when we're all poorer off for it, and it's going to make people who want to be more militant, feel lonely for a while. And I think the only thing I could say is that's a real danger and probably very alienating. But it might also be an opportunity for leadership if you can strengthen your connections with your coworkers and show them that you're the one who has the ultimate sort of eye on the sort of terrain that we're fighting on.
Well said. All right, guys, I'm gonna read some IMs and then we're gonna get out of here. Hanging up the phones. Sam Malama Ding Dong. You all talk about Roger Stone a lot, but I think the bigger dangerous freak is Michael Flynn. What are your thoughts on the former general who seems to be a Nazi and was pretty close to Jan 6? Any guests you could bring on to talk about Flynn, who some think is in charge of QAnon among other batshit crazy religious groups? I mean, we covered Michael Flynn's Nazi stuff last week. If you go and check out that clip, it should be on YouTube, I think.
I mean, I'm honestly more interested in his brother, who leads the military in the Pacific. Flynn is crazy, but he's to be part of the same class as Roger Stone now, which is
outside
reactionary conspirator with connections.
Right. Sherbert, Vivek is just running to boost his celebrity. According to ABC News, before running for office, Vivek was set up with the Daily Wire to be a host of his own show on the network. The point where he did full test runs with him, but they ended up scrapping the whole project because he sounded too scripted. So he decided to run for president and said, I really want the videos of the test runs released, though. That's good info. Dan from Columbus, did y'all speed that clip up, or does Vivek, it rhymes with cake, have the same speaking cadence as Shapiro, just with a lot less chipmunk sounding voice? He definitely has smart guy, clippy tone, right? And that they try to put on the right. Salty Line Cook, nullifying the Constitution is the job of the Supreme Court. Show some freaking respect, Chuck. Trek left. Finally, legal scholars have found the amendment to go after Whitey. Someone take Charlie's crayons away. He's embarrassing himself again. Congressional baseball fans, something has been bothering me for the past week and really needs to get off my chest. Fudge rounds aren't even a top tier Little Debbie snack cake. Are we really going to pretend like Nutty Bar, Star Crunch, and Christmas tree cakes don't exist? I'm not sure when we discuss such a thing, but you're always allowed to give your opinion.
Is it that the Fudge Rounds Oliver Anthony music lyric, the Rich Man North of Richmond song?
I have no idea. The Weary Traveler, could Trump even get out of the country with the constant Secret Service detail? Jay Tingle, house arrest is a good compromise, is a talking point that should be stomped out. Secret Service can easily protect Trump in prison. His punishment must include complete prohibition of internet use. No Fox News or right-wing news viewing either. The nation is lost if he doesn't go to jail.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I just don't know how much I believe will happen.
Juniper J. Sizzler, Florida State. What's the difference?
But I totally agree. The sort of faux hand-wringing about civil liberties with regards to a guy that was trying to very clearly overturn an election that he lost. I absolutely have zero time for it. I think he should rot in prison for the rest of it because of crime against democracy. And I think that if that creates a precedent that is in the future used against like Ilhan Omar, something like that, then we fight it and go to the barricades on that.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to give the guy a lie about elections for free to the point that it leads your freaks to the Capitol and gets some of them killed and other people killed. I don't think we need to do that to protect, Ilhan Omar's right to do politics for the next 10 years.
All right, 3 more guys. Ryan and Callie, the 14th Amendment is way too broadly written, not like the Second Amendment. Phineas Erb, I don't know if you've talked about it before, but the National Restaurant Association makes workers pay for SurfSave certification and then spends that to lobby against minimum wage increases. Please have someone on from the Restaurant Workers United. That is a good suggestion. Thank you very much.
I mean, this is just like that money gets to be diverted away from paying workers toward uses like that is the fundamental reason why in any sort of labor dispute, you want labor to take every cent from the capitalists that they can get their hands on.
And the final IM of the day, Train Boy. If Trump goes to jail, he should convert to Islam while incarcerated. Yes. Agreed. That would be his most entertaining arc yet. All right, check out Left Reckoning tonight. Yes.
Tonight at 7:00 Eastern time.
Check out check out ESPN, and we'll see you all tomorrow for a Hump Day show. See you then.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know.